Hey everybody, I'm super excited for this panel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about designing initial liquidity, or in other words, how do you launch a new token project into the public. And we have some industry titans here working on some of the most landmark projects across DeFi and crypto. So why don't we kick it off with some introductions?
I'll go first because apparently I'm not Joey from Faye. I'm Brianna, but I'm from the founding team of Faye Protocol.
I'm Andra. I'm the growth lead at 1inch Network, and I've been with 1inch for about 5 months.
Hey guys, my name is Sunny. I'm one of the co-founders of Osmosis and have been working within the Cosmos ecosystem for the last 4 years or so.
Yeah, so just for the benefit of the people here who may not be very familiar with the respective projects, would you guys mind giving maybe like a 1 or 2 liner about what your project is and what it does?
Sure. So Osmosis is a DEX that's built on the Cosmos ecosystem, really focused in on like a lot of privacy stuff. So, you know, MEV is bad. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They're lying. And so, you know, we're going to solve that using a lot of cool mempool privacy techniques. And yeah, working on a lot of other cool features as well.
Faye is a decentralized stablecoin with PCV, so we can redeploy the assets across different DeFi protocols to generate yield for the tribe holders.
And 1inch is a network of protocols. We started off building the #1 DEX aggregator on the market. We're also the second biggest DeFi project by a unique number of wallets interacting with our protocol. And that's about it.
It's awesome. And what I think is really interesting is when I look back to 2017, a lot of the newer tokens, they always have the same go-to-market, right? They just go to centralized exchanges, they try to get listed. But for all of you guys here, all of you launch a token in a more or less kind of permissionless way, but in very, very different methods as well. So would you guys kind of breaking down what was the rationale behind and how did you decide on how to launch the tokens?
So, you know, Osmosis, we launched our native token called Osmo. It's still not on any centralized exchanges, and I'd like to keep it like that as long as possible because we're building a decentralized exchange, and I have you know, belief in our own product. So we're not going to give our liquidity and volume to our centralized competitors. But yeah, so you know what we launched, you know, we were lucky enough to not have to like raise money or anything to launch it. We were just, you know, self-bootstrapped the entire way. But, you know, we're launching a proof of stake chain. So we need to have a decentralized distribution at Genesis because, you know, to be a proof of stake chain, you need to have like decentralized distribution. And so what we did was we actually did an airdrop to Atom holders, which is, you know, the main token of the Cosmos ecosystem. And people were like telling us like, oh, aren't airdrops dead? Like, you know, who does airdrops anymore? But we're like, no. I think if you like design airdrops correctly and you like, you know, don't just airdrop for the hell of it. You know, if you have like a goal in mind of what you're trying to do and accomplish with your airdrop, I think you can actually design. You know, I think airdrops themselves are like this fun mechanism design problem that you can do a lot of really cool stuff with. And you know, maybe we can talk about that in a bit. But no, I'd love to give other people a chance.
Yeah, so we did an IDO on Uniswap, and I think if we could reflect back to it, we would have capped it. But the reason that we didn't was because we did not want it to be taken over by whales and bots. So reflecting back, we would have done that. And the reason we did it, we wanted to keep it open and fair for retail investors to come in. So we had a lot of retail investors. We had a lot of whales that came in as well. The peg, we lost the peg at first. There was like a ton of sell pressure. We got the sell pressure out, and things are really stable now, really positive, and we have a lot of various different tribe holders. So we had 17,000 unique users that participated in our IDO, and that's why we left it open. And yeah, so we launched on Uniswap and did the IDO.
For us, it was a similar situation to Osmo token. We did an airdrop, and the thinking behind it was to distribute it to as many community members as possible. We wanted to reward those that were the most engaged with our protocols. You know, we had a snapshot that sort of presented us who those are, and they're all, you know, very happy token holders. Obviously, 1inch is a governance token, so ultimately the goal is to get them to vote on the parameters on our aggregation protocol, and our liquidity protocol. Again, we shouldn't be the ones to decide what the settings should be for each of these, right? Like things like price impact fee or decay time or what happens with the spread surplus. That's something that the community should vote on. And the only way they can get involved is by owning the token and participating in governance.
And what I think is really interesting as well is when we talk to founders and they ask us how they should launch a token, we always tell them there are a few things that you should think about in terms of what to optimize for, right? There's fairness, there's the breadth of distribution, there's like effective price discovery, there's liquidity. So what are the factors that you guys considered when you were first launching your own token? And what are some of the decisions you made to optimize for those specific metrics?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. So again, for us, it was really just having one of the most decentralized tokens. That's the only goal that we came with in mind. I wouldn't say that fairness was not also something that we considered. We obviously wanted to make sure that it's a fair distribution. And the way we did that was by offering to those that actually engage with the protocol. Because if you actually are going to have a governance token, it should be to those that actually use the products that you're building, right? I think that's an essential step in token distribution.
Yeah, so I think I just alluded to the fact of fairness was a big part of our token distribution of what we were trying to do. And the way that we set it up as well was that we had it open for 3 days. So the ETH price that you came in on, it was not determined until the last day. So on the third day, so we were trying to prevent front running and also back running. So we burned 300 million Fei during the launch as well. And we were just trying to keep it open and wanting lots of participants and retail investors to have a chance to be holders in this and it not be taken over by bots.
Yeah, I think fairness was actually a really big part of our airdrop design as well. So we actually did something a little bit weird where we did something called a quadratic fair drop. And so what that meant was people actually got an airdrop based off of the square root of the number of atoms that were in their account at the snapshot time. This was done for like a particular reason, which was, there's a lot of liquidity mining rewards on Osmosis right now. And so, we figured that, who's going to be getting the biggest chunk of liquidity mining rewards is going to be the whales. So we wanted to, in the initial airdrop, make sure we sort of depower the whales a little bit, give more to, smaller holders so that the whales can like earn back their portion by like participating in the liquidity mining program. So that was part of it. The other piece was, obviously from this quadratic nature, anyone who was holding tokens on centralized exchanges, a lot of atoms are currently held on Coinbase and Binance, and they got massively, hurt by the quadratic nature of it. But good. We got to teach people to stop holding tokens on centralized exchanges.
Yeah, that's a great example of kind of optimizing a feature to maximize a specific kind of metric there. I'm also curious whether you guys, in the process of thinking about launching this token, have you looked into some of the more popular approaches out there, things like Dutch auctions, for instance, because it seems like every project out there is doing a Dutch auction right now. So I'm curious, when you were evaluating different approaches to token launches, how did you kind of rank these things?
Like the initial pricing?
Yeah, the initial launch of the token.
Yeah, so we actually went ahead and just like threw it on an AMM pool. So Osmosis is an AMM DEX, and so we just threw it on a pool and let the market figure it out. It's probably not the best way of doing it. We also have like LBP functionality, like similar to the one that's like used by Balancer. I think there's a lot of improvements to be made. I think the Balancer LBP design was like Balancer had a hammer and everything looked like a nail, and I think it's a really cool design that shows off the weight change mechanism. But I think if you want to design like better auction systems, there's actually like cooler things you can do. And we've done LBPs on Osmosis now already, and I think we've learned a lot from that. And so we're actually working on designing some new LBP mechanisms for Osmosis so that more projects can start to use them.
Yeah, we were always going to go the AMM approach, so we didn't really consider any other ones.
And I was at 1 inch when the airdrop happened, so I'm not sure about the mentality behind, the pricing for it. But I'm sure Sergey will be happy to tell that story.
Got it. And I'm sure one thing that's on everybody's mind is in terms of regulations, right? How do you do a token launch, or how do you seed initial liquidity in a compliant manner? So what were those discussions like, and what were some of the maybe regulations that you guys may be watching out for?
Yeah, so, we never did a token sale of any sort. It was just an airdrop, and then the initial pools weren't even created by us. They were created by the community members. So, the team really had no involvement with like any sort of initial listing process. So I guess that kind of helped a bit. And then part of it also, even with an airdrop, like one of the nice things with like the 1-inch airdrop is that it was an airdrop to the users of a protocol, which is like that's nice. There's actually less like regulatory concern there. But with Osmosis, we were a brand new chain, and we needed a token distribution before the launch of the product itself because new proof of stake chain. So what we actually did was we had a way of converting our airdrop recipients into users where they actually had to do like a claims process and like claim the airdrop. So they got some airdrop amount, and then they have to do 4 tasks to actually claim the airdrop. So basically they have to do a swap, they have to add liquidity to a pool, they have to stake, and they have to vote in a governance proposal. And each time they do one of those tasks, they earn 25% of their airdrop. And by doing this process, it basically forces it that like you have to be a user to receive your airdrop. And anything that doesn't get claimed 6 months after launch gets like seized from people's accounts and put back into the treasury, the community treasury. So making sure that you're airdropping to users of a protocol, I think, is like really important.
So we launched as a DAO from day one, so I think that helped a lot as well. So all of the tribe holders could vote on every protocol improvement, and it helped kind of differentiate the reliance on the core team. It's a decentralized community. We have core contributors that are not on the actual Fay Labs team, but people are contributing to the protocol from the community from day one.
Yeah, and then on our end, the distribution happened through the foundation, and again, it went to members of our DAO. And as far as regulation goes, I guess there's 2 sort of sides here. One is the 1-inch token itself, which again is a governance token, and it has pure utility in our ecosystem. So in that sense, we don't see why it would be anything else or why we would have to register it as anything other than a utility token from a regulatory perspective. And the other side is all the tokens that go through our protocol. But again, we're just an aggregator. Execution actually doesn't happen on our protocol. So it's something that we have to keep an eye out as a space overall for what happens to each token for its own ecosystem, and obviously adjust from then on.
Got it. And besides regulations, I think there's also a lot of different pitfalls that founders might be subject to when they're trying to launch their project or when they're trying to seed their initial liquidity. We've seen auctions where it just ended with like 30 people getting all the tokens. So cartelization is one of the pitfalls there. So I'm curious what you guys think are some of the major pitfalls that you guys were very actively trying to avoid. And in retrospect, were there things that could have done better about how you launched the projects?
Yeah, I guess I can take that one first. So that's exactly what we were trying to avoid with the way that we designed our token launch. We retrospectively going back, we would have put a cap on it, and things would have gone in a different way. So putting the cap would have been a lot better instead of just having it totally be open. But the reason that we did not have the cap, again, was to have retail investors have an opportunity to come in and get the drop of Tribe.
Yeah, for us, it was, according to Sergey, again, I wasn't there, but it was a fairly smooth process, so we didn't really have anything that we could have done better. You could always make it even more decentralized and issue it to even more members, but 1-inch was still quite small. If only we had done the airdrop now with almost 700,000 unique users, what a story it would have been. But other than that, it was a fairly smooth sailing on our end.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the main thing for us was making sure we have like a decentralized validator set at launch, and I think we were able to accomplish that pretty well using the techniques we used.
Got it. And I want to go kind of off script a little bit and not just focus on the initial liquidity, but kind of talk about the incentivization of usage over time as well, which is something I think you touched on a little bit just now with the conditional claiming. So a lot of projects right now rely on very high inflationary rewards, right? Token incentives to get people to provide liquidity, to use the projects. What are your general views on that? How sustainable that is? Do you see that as kind of like a first step towards a more sustainable go-to-market strategy, or is this something that all the projects have to do?
Yeah, so I'll take that first too. I think something with our token launch as well is we raised $1 billion and there was nowhere for the Fay to go other than to our staking system. So I think that was something that we would definitely try to like redo again. And then when you think about liquidity and you think about liquidity mining programs, where either you're going to third-party market makers and you're going to a centralized entity, and I think everyone in this room is here because we're trying to move away from that, or you're doing this liquidity mining incentives that's not super sustainable. So actually what Faye is doing now with Ondo is there's a structured product, so there's going to be a senior and a junior tranche, and we can deploy Faye into it. And then the impermanent loss is going to be taken on by the current team's governance token, but it's a lot better than working with some of the third-party market makers. Like, we just got listed on a ton of centralized exchanges, like the tier 1 ones, and it's not really good terms for the teams. So this is a better option. You're just taking on the impermanent loss there, and it's really, you're actually getting the yield as well for the trading between the tokens and not having to convert to the other asset as well, to the base asset. So.
Yeah, for us, it's an easy one. Being that we're an aggregator, we are kind of letting other projects deal with the liquidity mining incentives and figuring out, how to attract more users to do farming on their platforms. But we also have our liquidity protocol, which we do have some farming on, but it's not something that we focused on. We think that we are much, much, much better at aggregation, and we are absolutely crushing it on that side. So again, this is something that we're happy to support. As soon as someone pops up with like a deep liquidity pool, we integrate it right away, and that's just the game that we're playing at 1inch.
Yeah. So. I've been talking much about the airdrop, but the airdrop is actually a very tiny portion of the Osmosis total supply. So it started off with 100 million tokens in Genesis, but the final supply of Osmosis is like 1 billion. So the Genesis supply is only 10%, and we went with a very what happens is in the first year there's 300 million new tokens minted, and then in the next year, every year after that, it gets cut by 1/3. So, year 2, it's 200 million, then 133 million. So, because Bitcoin has proof of work, has halvening, because 51% security. Tendermint is BFTs, we have 2/3 security, so it gets cut by 1/3. The logic makes sense, don't question it. But so that's what we did. And then from there, we made it so, 25% of new inflation goes to the to staking rewards, 45% goes to liquidity mining of like different pools on Osmosis, 5% goes to the community pool, and then 25% goes to the development team, which is currently our foundation, but chain governance has the ability to fire us whenever they want. So got to build in those protections in case I go rogue. But yeah, so I think like especially figuring out how like liquidity mining rewards and how to distribute them across different pools. So far we've had an algorithm that we use, which is like based off of like volume of a pool divided by liquidity, and we basically currently have like 2 base pairs on the system on the ecosystem in Osmosis right now, which is like Atom base pairs and Osmo base pairs. But like what's going to happen now is Terra is activating IBC in the next like couple weeks, and we imagine that like UST will like come onto the system and like become a 3rd base pair, and we've never added a new base pair to the system yet ever since launch. And so kind of figuring out how to shift incentives in a way that's like amenable to the current community, because the current community has a lot of liquidity in the current pools, but then how to shift incentives away from them and like still meet the needs of the new people coming into the ecosystem. So there's a lot of work going on in our like community forums and stuff about how to design these liquidity incentives going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think in crypto when we use the word incentive, we're almost always referring to token rewards, right? Kind of minting more tokens to get people to use your protocol. Is that the only lever that teams have to kind of incentivize usage, or are there other ways for people to incentivize adoption in the very beginning of a protocol?
Make it so people have to use your product. Like I said, like forcing people, give people free money, but then make them use your product to get the free money, and then they just fall in love with your product and keep using it.
Yeah, I think like finding the use cases is like super important from day one, and getting integrated places, having partnerships to be able to have usage for your token.
Yeah, same for 1inch. Community is super important for us. One thing we do is we listen to what they want, and what they want is more products and more places to put their tokens and use our all of our products. You know, we launched with the web app, and that was this initial place where you could go and trade 1inch, and then we launched a mobile app, mostly because the community said we want this. Now there's other stuff that they want, and we're working on building that as well. So I think that really comes with listening to them and having, you know, a bottom to the top sort of approach as far as building a new products goes, and I think the paying attention is a critical part of this psychological incentivization rather than monetary incentivization.
Oh, another one. So, worth noting that there is actually a second token on Osmosis. It's called Ions, and it was the result of me 2 days before launch running on fumes of sleep, thinking it would be funny to add a second token to Osmosis, and we just put it in the Genesis file, didn't tell anyone what it's for, why they got it, nothing, you know? But what happened was there was a community that formed around it, and it was like a mystery, and they were like, you know, like that meme with the guy like pointing at like the board with all the solving that mystery. It was like that. There's a chat with like over 1,000 people in it. They're just trying to figure out what the hell this thing is, and you know, so I'm good friends with like the folks at Commonwealth.
So what is it?
What?
So what is it?
I don't know. I'm telling you, I literally don't know what it is. And the community did actually successfully reverse engineer the token distribution, which is really cool. But it's a token curated community. And so like we just have this token, you give them a mystery to solve, and then they form these like cool communal social bonds in the process of solving that mystery. And now they're like working on developing protocols on top of it. And I think that's like such a cool mechanism of like how you build a community through mystery.
That's a really interesting point. It kind of reminds me of the loot NFTs that came out a while ago. Everybody was wondering what it is, and the community kind of found it. And I think on a corollary point, right, in terms of creating these communities, what I think has been really interesting in the past few years is you start to see more targeted token launches as well. I think there was a float protocol that was only allowing people who have only interacted with certain protocols before to like claim the tokens. So they're an increasingly sophisticated way for people to kind of target very specific type of users for their projects. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about that? You know, if you guys could target certain types of users, what types of users would those be, and how would you go about doing that?
I think if it makes sense for your project, being strategic is always good, right? Like I think I've seen like the degen score going on, and you can only get through if you pass a certain level of it. But for our project, that's not in our ethos of what we're trying to do. But for certain projects, I'm sure it makes sense.
Yeah, at 1inch actually, we're doing that. We're looking at how involved are the community members with our ecosystem, whether it's voting in a DAO again, or it's staking on a platform, or trading activity, whatever it may be. How many touch points do they have, so we can reward them more, so we can create mechanisms where they reward themselves more, right? Because everything is kind of a closed ecosystem. We don't really get to decide anything, I think that that's something that we want to focus on a little bit more in the future, as we're now growing to almost 1 million users in the next couple of months. And I think that it's time to ask ourselves, like, how can we separate those that are like really active users from those that are kind of laggards? It reminds me of sort of the NFT hype right now about you cannot attend this party unless you have this NFT. So I think that this is something similar is happening with ecosystems as well. And I think that's fair, because again, you're rewarding the most loyal customers, and I would personally like to be incentivized to continue to use or use even more all the different products that I'm using at the moment. So why not?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Just kind of what type of users profile would you like to target, and if so, how do you go about targeting that?
I see. I mean, I think we were targeting a combination of like we were targeting like Cosmos ecosystem users, as well as like DeFi users. And until Osmosis launched, those seemed to be actually relatively pretty disjoint sets, where like there wasn't a lot of DeFi going on in Cosmos, and so we had to like figure out how to like reach both, like find the people who are like involved on both sides. So.
Yeah, I think that touches on a really interesting point as well, because for those of us who have been in crypto for a while, we know how tribalistic things are. But now that, I think in the past few months, we've seen adoption really creep up on chains outside of Ethereum as well. So when you guys look at ecosystems outside of your own, how do you kind of decide which do you want to expand to, and how do you incentivize early adopters to go to those new chains or those new deployments on those other chains?
That's like, so, you know, the Cosmos vision is almost antithetical to that like approach where, you know, I think there's this notion of like the multi-chain versus the interchain. And the multi-chain is this idea of like, okay, you have a protocol and there's all these like L1s that are popping up and, you know, let's like let's redeploy on all these L1s, right? And, you know, this is what like some protocols are doing, like Sushi and Aave, and where it's like, all right, new EVM compatible chain, let's deploy there. And meanwhile, they just end up splitting their liquidity across all these chains and like, What the Cosmos approach is you have the interchain approach is this idea that, you know, what you end up having is application-specific chains, and those application-specific chains then connect to everything else. And, you know, the DeFi blue chip that gets it is Compound, right? Compound is like, no, we're not deploying anywhere else. We're building Compound chain and going to connect to everything else. And so Osmosis is taking the same approach, but with the AMM dexes.
Yeah, so for us, it's actually very technically difficult to redeploy PCV, which is our protocol-controlled value, to other chains. So we're going to take a very slow approach here. We have a couple engineers that are working on it, moving to layer 2, doing multi-chain things. We know it's the future. So we have a couple folks that are working on it, but it's very technically difficult. So it's not going to be on our roadmap for the next couple of quarters.
Yeah, for us, I touched on this a bit in the previous panel. We are open to supporting multiple chains. We are constantly looking and evaluating them if it makes sense for us to support them. It's all about the activity they have, how many users, trading volumes, TVL, all of these metrics that we look at. We're a trading platform, so by default, the type of user that we play with is the very active one. If you're just buying crypto and holding it, that's probably not an ideal customer for 1inch, and therefore we'll probably not interact with their ecosystem, whatever that is. So obviously, like I said, we're looking to support as many as possible. Again, we don't believe in cross-chain just yet for our specific product. Aggregation, or at least our algorithm, doesn't or wouldn't work as efficiently as it does on a single chain. So we would like to focus, at providing the best market rates on individual chains rather than cross-chain. But we're not excluding any chains from our network.
Got it. That makes sense. And with the last minute I have, I want to make sure I get you guys advice and insight on. So say there are teams out there that are trying to seed their initial liquidity or launch their project. What are the 1 or 2 things that they must absolutely look out for, and what are some of the biggest lessons that you took away from the launches of your respective projects?
Be fun and interesting. Don't do something boring.
That's a good one.
Think about caps.
Tokenomics, token design.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have, and thank you so much, guys, for spending time with us.